There's an ongoing tension between politicians and reporters. Reporters are supposed to report on politicians and keep them honest through oversight and careful reporting, so politicians are naturally skeptical of them. However, politicians need reporters to help get their side of the story out and to get positive coverage that will help them get reelected, so they need the reporters. Similarly, reporters need politicians because politicians are typically a good source of information on whatever is going on in Washington, D.C. The role of the reporter here is pivotal, and how politicians can manipulate them helps frame this relationship. The reporter's role is both to determine what is newsworthy and to help define the context of the story or to frame it for the audience. However, reporters typically work what is called a beat, or a general story area. This can be a geographic location, it can be an institution like Congress or the President, or it can be a policy domain like immigration or gun control. Because the reporter has to work that beat for the foreseeable future, they have incentives to be friendly to members of Congress and to work with them in a way that creates a positive, long-lasting relationship. This, in turn, weakens the incentive for oversight. The last thing I want to mention is that reporters are not neutral conduits for information. Even in their best efforts, they have biases and opinions, and like any other human being, those biases affect their reporting. There's no such thing as neutral information or an unbiased story. A great example comes from the TV show Nightline, back during the Iraq War, when Ted Koppel wanted to read the names of all the people who died during the war up to that point. The whole thing would have taken the whole hour program and would have been a significant media event. The names of the soldiers who died were facts, and anti-war people argued that this was a neutral presentation of information. Ted Koppel was simply going to read the names of people who had died with a dispassionate voice. How could this possibly be biased? Well, people in favor of the war had a different view. They would prefer that Ted Koppel just gave a number of people who died, or even just showed the video of Iraqi people cheering after American soldiers pulled down the statue of Saddam Hussein. Those were also facts, right? So why not share those? The facts you choose to present can affect people's opinions, and people know that. It's impossible to be neutral, no matter how hard you try. Back in what those with rose-colored glasses describe as the good old days, we saw a time where newspaper reporters ruled the news. They worked closely with politicians on a basis of mutual trust and profit, and developed close, chummy relationships with a few politicians who sought to influence the press. Similarly, FDR had meetings of reporters he would call family gatherings. This was all about cooperation, solving the prisoner's dilemma because those who defected would lose access to the president, and reporters would even police themselves to avoid cutthroat competition. The cooperative atmosphere is often thought to work better, but oversight was low because everyone wanted to get along. Today, we have a far larger and more diverse population of news producers, from newspapers to blogs to cable TV to traditional TV to Twitterers and the MySpacers to whatever else is going to come in the future. It's more of a true marketplace rather than a cartel controlled by only a few major players, and much of this was brought on by the internet. However, we see a much more strained relationship between journalists and elected officials due to suspicion that officials lie to journalists. Things like Vietnam and Watergate created what is known as a credibility gap, or a gap between the actions and words of politicians. They say one thing and then do another. This doesn't create much trust with reporters, which then translates down to the people who end up with a pox on both houses philosophy where they trust neither, get frustrated, check out, all those things we spoke about earlier. The media and Congress regularly fight to be the least approved of and least trusted institutions in America. Just like everything else, there are trade-offs between the two sides, and we have to figure out what we want and how much we want from our institutions. Well, that's all for this lecture on the media. Tune in next time for what I'm sure will be a very big day where we talk about voting and elections.